I recall this episode from when I was a kid. It was a rainy night, and lightning was striking every few minutes. The water drops tapped relentlessly on the windows, making the whole situation about being home alone more scary. I was only living with my mom, and she was often working late, so it was not unusual that I had to tuck myself in at night. I always turned most of the lights off because my mom told me it was unnecessary money to use on lights, when I only was sitting in one room at a time. But this obviously just made the scenery more unsettling. I sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, with the volume from the TV as loud as I could tolerate, to think less about the thunder. The flickering lightning brightened up the room, which made me occasionally look outside to see if I could catch a glimpse of the lightning. At one point, when looking out the window, I saw a man standing outside the house on the street. I didn't think much of it, but when I just a few minutes later looked again, I saw him walking away. I stood at the window for a bit and kept looking, and realized the man was walking up and down the street. I found it a bit odd because of the weather, and he didn't look like he was homeless, so I didn't get why he would just casually walk back and forth. At this point, I don't know if he had seen me looking at him, so I just went back to the TV. 10 minutes passed, until out of nowhere, a deafening clap of thunder rattled the windows, causing me to jump off the couch in surprise. It sounded like it was right above our house. The sudden burst of fear I felt made me seek help and comfort, and without a second thought, I ran to my neighbor's house without even putting my shoes on. They knew my mom well, so I hoped I could stay with them till she came back. I pounded on their door while standing in the pouring rain crying, but no one opened. Another big thunder echoed the streets, and I immediately ran back inside my house. I hid in a corner beside the couch, which was my safe space for when I was scared as a kid. A series of knocks echoed through the house. My heart skipped a beat, and I approached the front door without hesitation, thinking it must be my neighbors reacting from when I knocked on their door earlier. I swung the door open. But it wasn't them. In front of me stood the man who was walking up and down the street earlier. He was completely soaked and seemed harmless. He offered his help and said that he noticed me knocking on my neighbor's door. As my mom always has told me not to go home with strangers, I declined his offer politely, thinking the same rules applied for inviting them inside our house. I walked over to the window to keep an eye on the man. Luckily, he was walking away from the house. As the minutes stretched into an hour, the storm outside showed no signs of stopping. The rain and thunder was still going at it. I tried to distract myself watching TV from my safe space. But that's when I heard footsteps from outside, thinking it was my mom. I ran to the window but couldn't see anyone outside at all, which led me to believe I must have heard wrong. Panic started to set in when I saw a silhouette at the back door through the rain-streaked window, attempting to open the door. I thought to myself that it had to be the man from earlier, since my mom would have used the front door and would have a key to open the doors either way. I dialed my mom's number. She told me to call the police and that she would come back home immediately. I got back to my corner and called the police. I just sat there waiting for something to happen. Finally, my mom arrived shortly, followed by the police. The man wasn't found, and when our neighbors heard about the story, they were sad that they weren't home that day. For this story, I'm going to start by giving you some important information. I am deaf, but I have not always been. I lost my hearing due to a severe injury to the head, which involved the auditory nerve that led to the result in my hearing loss. On my front door, I have a sign that says, "I am deaf," so I won't be able to hear knocks on the door or the doorbell, though I can still feel some vibrations from loud noises. So, it all started when I had to leave my old job because I lost my hearing. I was primarily answering phone calls. Life got tough, but I decided to move forward and get a fresh start. So I moved away from Tennessee to Florida. After looking at apartments and houses for a while, I found this house in a quiet neighborhood, which seemed like the perfect place to rebuild. At first, I was a bit lonely, but I settled down pretty quick. After living here for 4 months, my best friend wanted to come visit and see how I lived and also wanted to go to Florida. When she arrived, we had planned to make dinner ourselves and just relax at home with a movie and board games. As we were catching up in the living room, she suddenly asked if I lived with a boyfriend or if I had upstairs neighbors. Since she lives in an apartment, she only has one floor. So, I remember how proudly I told her that the whole house was mine. She then continued saying that she was sure she heard noises upstairs, which was why she asked me. I was puzzled. My house was supposed to be empty, and I obviously hadn't heard anything unusual. Neither had I seen any signs of intrusion. I did remember one time, though, when I felt vibrations as if there was a loud noise, but I never thought anything of it. We continued with our conversation and dinner. After dinner, my friend had to use the bathroom. She excused herself and went upstairs. When she came back down, she said yet again that she could hear things from upstairs while she was in the bathroom. And since the bathroom was upstairs, she said the noises came from the attic. We decided to go upstairs. She gave me signals that she could still hear the sounds. She pointed at the attic hatch, and we decided to open it. We were hit with a cold gust of air and a terrible stench. To our shock, there was a makeshift living space up there, dirty blankets, a dirty mattress, and some clothes scattered around. As we pivoted our heads around, we saw a man sitting in his boxers in the corner. We screamed and closed the hatch as fast as we could. I couldn't believe my eyes. I'd been living in that house for months, completely unaware that someone else had been living right above me. We called the police while we ran out of the house and stood on the sidewalk, waiting for the police to arrive. The police arrived promptly, and as they questioned the man, he seemed harmless, just a desperate soul looking for a place to stay. It turns out he had been there for weeks, sneaking in when I was at work, eating my food and using my facilities when I was out. He must have read the sign on my door and thought it was the perfect opportunity, as I couldn't hear him come and go. But for me, it was horror finding out someone was living with me without me knowing it. The man was escorted out, and I was left shaken and disturbed. I decided to move out immediately. The police assured me that they would keep an eye on things, but the damage was done. It was no longer a safe place for me, knowing that someone had been silently sharing my space for weeks. When I was 14, I had to babysit my cousin. Around 9 p.m. this particular day, I found myself at my cousin's house, in charge of babysitting for the night. My mom and aunt were out shopping, and my dad and uncle were at the movie theater. So we passed time by doing what cousins mostly do, which involved some games and play fighting. Everything was fine until I started feeling an odd sensation after seeing a man outside. My cousin and I started watching TV, but the strange feeling persisted, prompting me to get up and lock the doors. A few moments later, a chill ran down my spine as I noticed a disheveled-looking man outside, peering through the window and fixating on my cousin. My protective instincts kicked in, but I kept my composure as well as I could. I pretended not to see the man, and casually suggested to my cousin that it was bedtime since our parents would be back soon, and he had to sleep before they came home. I took my cousin upstairs, tucked him into bed, all the while aware that there was a man outside with questionable intentions. Despite being only 14 and weighing around 125 pounds and standing at 5'8", my athleticism from playing football instilled a sense of confidence. I went back downstairs and entered the kitchen to grab a meat tenderizing hammer for protection. When I returned to the window where I had spotted the man, he was gone. This made me, of course, concerned, but I checked and secured the front door. Both the deadbolt and the knob were firmly locked. I then returned upstairs with my meat tenderizing hammer that was now my weapon. I positioned myself in front of my cousin's door, telling him not to worry and to stay low. I called the police and then my dad and uncle. They told me I had done a great job and they would get home as quickly as they could. With the authorities and family members still some time away, the tranquility shattered as I heard a window break and the heavy footsteps of an intruder on the main floor. Gripping the meat tenderizer tightly, I could sense the fear coursing through me. My heart was beating rapidly. The man roamed all the rooms downstairs. I just held my ground and waited inside the room, with my cousin laying under the sheets in the bed, ready for whatever came next. After what felt like an eternity, the heavy footsteps started ascending the stairs. My cousin's room was not more than 10 feet away from the top of the staircase. The intruder rifled through my aunt and uncle's room and then the bathroom, before he retraced his steps downstairs and opened the door to the basement. 15 minutes later, the police arrived, storming into the house. It turned out that the intruder had escaped from a mental hospital from one city away.